The loudest sound in my backyard wasn't my kids laughing. It was Denise Holloway telling them to climb down. The treehouse sat 20 feet above the ground in the biggest oak tree on our property. My father and I had built it together 8 years earlier, one summer before he passed away. Every board, every railing, and every crooked little window reminded me of weekends spent with him, teaching my son Liam and daughter Emma how to measure twice and cut once. To my kids, it wasn't just a treehouse. It was a pirate ship on Mondays, a castle on Wednesdays, a space station whenever homework was finished early. On Saturday afternoons, it became the greatest classroom they'd ever had. Emma loved reading books up there, while Liam filled notebooks with sketches of birds, squirrels, and butterflies that wandered through the old oak branches. Sophie, now home from college for the weekend, often climbed up with them carrying science books and binoculars. They called it the Sky Classroom. Denise called it an eyesore. I was staining a section of the deck railing when I heard her voice from the fence. "Ethan!" I looked over. She stood with both hands on her hips, staring toward the tree. "What exactly is that structure?" I smiled. "The treehouse. It violates neighborhood aesthetics. It entertains 2 children. It dominates the skyline." I looked around. We don't exactly have skyscrapers competing with it. She ignored the joke. The HOA never approved elevated recreational structures. My father built it before this HOA rule even existed. It still doesn't comply. Emma leaned over the railing. "Miss Denise." Denise looked up. "Yes?" Emma proudly held up a notebook. "I'm learning about blue jays today." Liam appeared beside her. "And I found a woodpecker nest." Denise sighed dramatically. "You should both be on the ground." Liam frowned. "Why?" "Because—" She hesitated. "It's not appropriate." Emma looked genuinely confused. "We're reading." Denise didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out her phone, took several photographs, and walked away. 2 days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Unapproved elevated recreational structure. Visual non-compliance remove. Within 30 days. I stared at the notice in disbelief. Sophie read it over my shoulder. They actually called it recreational. Apparently. Emma looked up from the kitchen table. "It's not just for playing." Liam nodded immediately. "We do school up there. We watch birds. We study weather. We learned constellations last month." Emma added another point. "And Dad taught us fractions while building the shelves." Sophie smiled. "They're actually telling the truth." She turned toward me. "Half their science projects happen in that treehouse." That evening, several neighbors wandered into the backyard after hearing about the violation. Mrs. Alvarez climbed halfway up the ladder before laughing. "I haven't been in a treehouse since I was 12. Mr. Lawson looked around the little room. "You built all this?" "My father and I." He nodded slowly. "It shows." The walls held maps, shelves filled with children's books, a whiteboard, binoculars, bird identification charts, weather journals, and a telescope folded neatly into one corner. Mrs. Alvarez looked around. "This isn't really a playhouse. It's more like an outdoor classroom." The words stayed with me. Outdoor classroom. After everyone left, I carried the violation notice into my office. I wasn't interested in reading the HOA handbook. Instead, I searched state education resources. Homeschool enrichment, outdoor education, nature-based learning. About an hour later, I stumbled across something I had never heard of before. A county initiative encouraging outdoor educational spaces for children. I clicked one link, then another, then a downloadable application. Sophie walked into the room carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She looked at my screen. "You found something?" I slowly nodded. I think Denise just made one very expensive mistake. She stepped closer and read the heading aloud. County Outdoor Learning Environment Registration Program. Then she looked back at me and smiled. Oh, she thinks she's fighting a treehouse. I couldn't stop grinning. She has no idea she's about to argue with the county's education department. The next morning, I called the county's Department of Education outreach. A woman named Rebecca Morgan answered with the kind of cheerful voice that suggested she genuinely enjoyed helping parents. When I explained that my children spent hours each week studying science, reading, and nature observation inside a backyard treehouse, she laughed. You'd be surprised how often we hear stories like that. I doubt many end with an HOA violation. She paused. Actually, more than you'd think. Within 20 minutes, Rebecca emailed me the application for the County Outdoor Learning Environment Registration Program. The program encouraged families, schools, libraries, and community organizations to create dedicated outdoor educational spaces where children could study nature, wildlife, weather, astronomy, reading, and environmental science. Registered locations could receive educational recognition, curriculum materials, and inclusion in the county's learning resource network. I kept reading. Then I found the eligibility requirements. Liam's whiteboard, Emma's bird journals, the telescope, the weather station, the bookshelves. Every single item already matched the county's recommendations. Sophie leaned over my shoulder. You're kidding. No. We accidentally built exactly what they were looking for. 3 days later, County Education Specialist Dr. Hannah Brooks arrived in a county SUV with the Department of Education logo displayed on both front doors. Naturally, Denise happened to be watering flowers across the street. The moment she saw the county vehicle stop at my house, she abandoned her hose and walked over. "Good morning," she said. "What brings the county here?" Dr. Brooks smiled warmly. "I'm evaluating an application for outdoor learning environment registration." Denise frowned. "What application?" "The treehouse." Denise blinked. "I'm sorry. The treehouse?" "Yes." She looked at me. "You reported your own violation?" I smiled. "I invited educators instead." Dr. Brooks climbed into the treehouse and spent nearly 2 hours examining every corner. She reviewed Liam's wildlife notebooks, read Emma's nature journal, tested the small weather station mounted beside the window, looked through the telescope. Even the hand-painted star chart attached to the ceiling earned compliments. "This is wonderful," she said. "It feels like a miniature field classroom." Emma proudly pointed toward the bookshelves. "We have books about birds, and trees, and insects, and planets." Liam held up a binder. "I record every bird that visits our yard." Dr. Brooks flipped through the pages. Blue jays, cardinals, woodpeckers, owls, even migration dates. She smiled. "You're doing real field observation." Denise folded her arms. "It's still a recreational structure." Dr. Brooks looked at her politely. "Do the children play here?" "Of course," she nodded. "They also learn here." She gestured around the room. "Education doesn't stop because children enjoy it." Several neighbors had gathered beneath the tree by then. Mrs. Alvarez smiled up at the platform. "My granddaughter reads up there every Saturday." Mr. Lawson laughed. Ethan helped my grandson identify 6 different bird species from that window. Another neighbor added, "My kids learned constellations here during the meteor shower." The conversation was no longer about a treehouse. It was about what happened inside it. Dr. Brooks completed her final notes before opening the back of her SUV. She removed a polished wooden plaque with the county seal engraved across the top. Everyone gathered closer. The plaque read, "County Registered Outdoor Learning Environment, Supporting Nature-Based Education." Emma's eyes lit up. "Can we hang it by the ladder?" Dr. Brooks smiled. "That's exactly where most families put it." Denise stared at the plaque, then at the treehouse, then back at me. "So instead of removing it, the county is recognizing it?" Dr. Brooks nodded. "We're encouraging it." I couldn't help smiling. Denise noticed immediately. "What?" I looked at the plaque one more time. "I was just thinking. This isn't going to make the treehouse easier to ignore." I paused just long enough to see her expression change. "It's about to become one of the county's officially recognized outdoor learning environments." For the first time since she had taken those photographs over the fence, Denise looked like she wished she'd simply let the kids keep reading in the tree. By the following Tuesday evening, the Crestview Manor clubhouse was overflowing. Every seat had been taken 20 minutes before the meeting even started. Parents stood along the back wall, children whispered excitedly near the entrance, and several local reporters waited outside after hearing the county had officially recognized the Treehouse classroom. Caleb nudged me as we walked in. "I've never seen this many people show up for an HOA meeting." Sophie laughed. "They're not here for the HOA. They're here for the Treehouse." She wasn't wrong. Denise Holloway stood at the front of the room, beside the projector, with a thick binder under one arm. Her confident expression suggested she still believed she could win. She struck the gavel. "This architectural hearing concerns an unapproved elevated recreational structure located on Lot 42. I stood. "County Registered Outdoor Learning Environment." She didn't even acknowledge the correction. "The terminology is irrelevant." "It seems very relevant to the county." Several parents smiled. Denise clicked to the first slide. Photographs of the treehouse appeared on the projector. Then she switched to an architectural rendering. The treehouse had been replaced with a much smaller platform hidden behind decorative lattice walls. The telescope was gone. The bookshelves had disappeared. Large privacy panels blocked the surrounding trees, and the observation windows had been reduced to tiny openings. "The Architectural Committee recommends these changes to improve neighborhood appearance," Denise announced. I looked toward Dr. Hannah Brooks. She slowly stood. "I strongly recommend against every one of them." The room became silent. She walked toward the projector. "The observation windows are essential." She pointed to the drawing. "They allow wildlife study." She moved to the covered walls. "Blocking visibility defeats the educational purpose." Then she pointed to the missing telescope. "And removing scientific equipment transforms a learning environment back into an ordinary play structure." Richard adjusted his glasses. "So making it prettier actually makes it less educational." "Exactly." Dr. Brooks nodded. "The value isn't the wood. It's what children experience inside." She changed the slide to a county educational guideline. Large letters appeared across the screen. outdoor learning spaces should maximize opportunities for observation, exploration, scientific inquiry, and independent learning. She looked directly at the board. This treehouse already does that exceptionally well. Frank Ellis quietly lifted his camera. Denise noticed. Mr. Ellis, why are you photographing another HOA meeting? He smiled politely. Because this stopped being a story about a treehouse. What is it now? It's about whether adults value children's education as much as appearances. Several parents quietly applauded. Mrs. Alvarez stood first. My granddaughter finished her first bird journal in Ethan's treehouse. Another father raised his hand. My son learned to use a telescope there. A mother near the back smiled. My daughter hated reading. Now she asks if she can borrow books from Ethan's treehouse library. One by one, parents began sharing stories. Children identifying butterflies, learning weather patterns, watching owls at dusk, sketching leaves, reading books they would never have opened indoors. Nobody described it as a playground. They described it as the place where their children became curious. Richard finally turned toward Denise. I have a question. She nodded cautiously. If the county officially recognizes this as an educational facility, what authority does the HOA actually have to require changes that county educators believe would reduce its educational value? Denise immediately opened her binder. She searched one section, then another, then another. Nothing. Because nowhere in the HOA handbook had anyone anticipated arguing with the county's education department. Just then, the clubhouse doors opened. Everyone turned. A woman wearing a navy blazer embroidered with the county seal stepped inside carrying a leather portfolio. Dr. Brooks smiled immediately. I wasn't expecting her. I recognized her from the county website. County Director of Educational Programs Margaret Sullivan had personally arrived at the hearing. Judging by Denise's expression, she realized this meeting had just become much bigger than a treehouse. County Director of Educational Programs Margaret Sullivan walked confidently to the front of the clubhouse, placing her leather portfolio beside the HOA board's paperwork. The room became completely silent. Even Denise Holloway stopped organizing her binder. Margaret smiled warmly before addressing the board. Good evening. Dr. Brooks informed me there were questions regarding one of the county's newest outdoor learning environments. She opened the portfolio and removed several official documents bearing the county seal. I thought it would be helpful to explain why programs like this exist. Richard nodded. We'd appreciate that. Margaret handed me a framed certificate. Across the top, in bold blue lettering, it read, County of Harrison, official outdoor learning environment, registered educational site. Emma practically bounced out of her chair. We're really official now. Margaret smiled. You certainly are. She pressed a remote. A county map appeared on the projector displaying small blue book icons scattered across parks, libraries, nature preserves, and schools. One icon sat directly over Crestview Manor. This afternoon, the Cole family's treehouse was officially added to the county's outdoor learning network. Linda adjusted her glasses. So the county actually keeps track of places like this? We do, Margaret nodded. Our goal is to encourage learning beyond traditional classrooms. She pointed toward the map. These registered locations host reading activities, wildlife observation, environmental science, astronomy, creative writing, and family education. She looked toward Liam and Emma. The Cole family has already documented more than 60 bird species, weather observations, and nature journals. Emma proudly whispered to Liam, "I told you we should keep writing everything down." Margaret continued, "What impressed our department wasn't the treehouse. It was what happened inside it." She smiled toward the audience. Children who are excited to learn. Mrs. Alvarez slowly raised her hand. "My granddaughter asks to read in that treehouse every weekend." Another parent stood. "My son learned more about birds there in one afternoon than he did in an entire semester." A third parent smiled. "My daughter hated science. Now she wants binoculars for her birthday." Margaret nodded. "That's exactly why these programs exist. Curiosity grows when children experience learning instead of simply reading about it." Denise finally spoke. "Our concern has always been neighborhood appearance." Margaret remained perfectly calm. "I understand." She removed one final document from her portfolio. "This is the county's recommendation regarding registered outdoor educational facilities." Copies were passed around the board table. Richard quietly read aloud. "The county strongly discourages unnecessary alteration, reduction, relocation, or obstruction of registered outdoor learning environments when such modifications diminish educational function." Linda continued. "Observation areas, learning equipment, educational displays, and natural visibility are considered essential components of registered educational spaces." The clubhouse fell silent. Margaret folded her hands. "If an organization knowingly requires changes that reduce educational opportunities for children, that organization directly undermines a county-supported educational initiative." Nobody spoke. Denise slowly closed her binder. For the first time since she'd photographed the treehouse, she had absolutely nothing left to argue. Richard cleared his throat. "I'd like to make a motion." Linda smiled. "Go ahead." "I move that all violations against Lot 42 be dismissed immediately." He looked toward Margaret. "And I further move that any structure officially recognized by a government educational program be permanently exempt from HOA aesthetic enforcement, provided its educational purpose remains active." Melissa immediately raised her hand. "I second." Another board member followed. "So do I." Denise looked around the table. One hand, then another. Then every remaining board member. The vote was unanimous. "The motion passes," Linda announced. Applause filled the clubhouse. Parents smiled, children cheered, and several neighbors stood to congratulate Liam and Emma. Mrs. Alvarez hugged Sophie while Mr. Lawson walked over carrying an old brass telescope. "I've had this sitting in my attic for years," he said. "It deserves a better home." He handed it to Liam. "I think your classroom can use it." Liam's eyes grew wide. "Seriously?" Mr. Lawson smiled. "Promise me you'll find Saturn with it." "I will." Over the next few months, something remarkable happened. More families built outdoor reading spaces. The HOA quietly revised its architectural guidelines to exempt county-recognized educational structures, and the county selected our treehouse as the first stop on its annual Family Outdoor Learning Tour. School teachers brought small groups of students to observe birds, learn basic astronomy, and see how education could happen outside 4 classroom walls. The biggest surprise came that fall. The county presented Crestview Manor with its Community Learning Partnership Award, after becoming the first neighborhood in the region to actively support registered outdoor learning environments. The same treehouse Denise had labeled an unapproved recreational structure became the centerpiece of the ceremony, with county officials, teachers, parents, and dozens of children gathered beneath the old oak tree. As for Denise, she never complained about the treehouse again. Every now and then, I'd notice her slowing her evening walks beneath the oak tree just long enough to hear children laughing while they pointed binoculars toward another bird's nest. She never admitted she'd been wrong, but she stopped calling it a playhouse. Eventually, even she started referring to it as the little classroom in the tree. Sometimes that's as close to an apology as you ever get. So remember this from Sovereign Verdict. Subscribe for more stories, know your local regulations, and never let an HOA Karen tell you that learning has to stay inside four walls. Sometimes the strongest foundation for a child's future begins with a few wooden boards, an old oak tree, and someone willing to protect their curiosity.